So there's a guy freezing in Siberia, and there's another guy dying of typhus. And there's Lenin in Moscow going, "This is fine." Except it wasn't fine. This is the story of how one general's terrible decision to stop for tea changed the entire 20th century. It's 1919. Russia's falling apart faster than a cheap bookshelf. The Bolsheviks control Moscow. Barely, but they're surrounded. To the east, Admiral Kolchak, slowly being crushed by the Red Army. To the northwest, General Yudenich, poking at Petrograd. And to the south, General Anton Denikin, leading the biggest white army of them all, marching straight for Moscow. Lenin's in his office when Trotsky bursts in. "Vladimir, we're surrounded." "Yes, I can see that on the map, Leon." The giant arrows on the map are kind of hard to miss. Should we evacuate? To where? Finland? They hate us. Poland? They really hate us. Meanwhile, down south, Denikin's men are making real progress. Towns are falling one by one. The Red Armies stretch thin, starving, and on the edge of collapse. This is it. The moment. Problem is, his own army was also stretched thin, starving, and on the edge of collapse. Then Denikin stopped. To rest, to reorganize, to, no joke, have tea. That pause gave his army exactly what it needed. Time. Time to regroup, time to reinforce, and time to form a solid battle plan. But this didn't actually happen. In real history, in October 1919, General Denikin's White Army got within 320 kilometers of Moscow. That's close. Really close. The Bolsheviks were panicking. Meanwhile, Kolchak was way out in Siberia retreating, and the whites in the north, led by Yudenich, were carving out huge swathes of red territory. The White Army's claws were closing around the fledgling Soviet Socialist Republic. Now in real history, Denikin was defeated by a Red Army before he could even get to Moscow. Trotsky rallied the defenders of Petrograd and defeated Yudenich. This led to the creation of what we know as the Soviet Union. Now for those of you who didn't know, the Reds are communists led by Lenin and Trotsky. The Whites were everyone else who didn't want that, which was surprisingly a lot of people. The Allied powers actually supported the White Army. The main problem was that Britain and France were tired. They'd just finished World War I. They sent some supplies, some advisors, but no real troops. Churchill wanted to send more help. "We should send an army." "Winston, our soldiers just survived the trenches." "You want to send them to Russia? In winter?" "Well, when you put it that way, no, we're sending canned food and thoughts and prayers." So Denikin got close, ran out of supplies, and had to retreat. By November 1919, the Red Army counterattacked. The White Army collapsed. The rest is history. But what if Churchill had actually won that argument? October 1919. A British war room in London. "Gentlemen, if we don't help the whites now, Russia goes communist forever. And then they'll try to communize us." "That's ridiculous, Winston." "Fine. What if I told you that if Russia goes communist, eventually your great-great-grandchildren will argue about it on something called the internet?" "What's an internet?" "I don't know, but it sounds dreadful." "Send the troops." So Britain and France actually commit. They land 40,000 troops at Novorossiysk on the Black Sea. Fresh soldiers, modern weapons, and most importantly, logistics officers who know what they're doing. November 1919. Denikin's retreating army suddenly gets reinforced. "We brought supplies. Finally. Do you have food?" "Yes." "Ammunition?" "Yes." "Competent staff officers?" 3 of them, actually. This changes everything. The combined white Allied force regroups and pushes north. It takes 3 months, but by February 1920, they're at Moscow's gates. Lenin tries to escape but gets caught at the train station carrying a suitcase full of Marx books. "Oi, where do you think you're going?" "I was just going to spread the revolution elsewhere." "Sir, the revolution is cancelled. Can I at least keep my books?" "No." So now Russia has a white government. Kolchak becomes temporary leader, but he's terrible at politics. Within 6 months, there's an election. A constitutional monarchy gets established under a Romanov cousin nobody's ever heard of. His name is Grand Duke Nikolai Nikolaevich, and his main qualification is that he's still alive. Can someone explain what a constitution is? It means you don't have real power, sir. Then why am I here? Tradition. The new Russian Republic, as it's called, is a mess. But it's a capitalist mess. American and British banks immediately start lending money. By 1925, Russia's industrializing faster than the Soviets ever could have, because Western companies are flooding in. Ford opens a factory in Moscow. Where's all the communism I heard about? We shot it, sir. Good. Here's $50 million. Now, here's where it gets interesting. In our timeline, Hitler rose to power partly because Germans were terrified of communist Russia. But in this timeline, Russia is just another capitalist country. When Hitler tries his beer hall putsch in 1923, German conservatives are like, why do we need this screaming Austrian? Russia's not a threat anymore. Hitler gets arrested, writes his book in jail, but when he gets out, nobody cares. The Nazi Party stays a fringe group of angry men in beer halls. We will conquer Europe. Hans, you drive a taxi. Sit down. Instead, Germany democratizes properly. The Weimar Republic survives. When the Great Depression hits in 1929, there's problems, sure, but no Hitler to exploit them. Instead, Germany elects a series of boring center-left governments who fix things slowly. This is the big one. Without Hitler, there's no Nazi Germany. Without Nazi Germany, there's no World War II as we know it. Japan still invades China in 1937 because that was happening regardless. But Europe? Peace. Boring, beautiful peace. France is just sitting there, making wine. Britain's colonizing stuff as usual. Germany's building excellent automobiles. And Russia? Russia's having its own problems. By 1935, the constitutional monarchy isn't working great. There's massive inequality. Strikes everywhere. The Grand Duke is still confused about his job. Do I have power this week? No, sir. What about next week? Also no. In 1936, there's a peaceful revolution. Not a shooting revolution, a voting revolution. A reformist named Alexander Kerensky, who fled in our timeline, returns from exile and wins the presidency. Russia becomes a full democracy. He immediately starts land reform, creates a welfare state, and basically implements communism light. All the social programs, none of the gulags. Wait, you're helping poor people and letting us make money? Yes, that's actually reasonable. Here's where it gets really different. Without Soviet support, the Chinese Communist Party is tiny. Mao Zedong is a librarian in Changsha who writes angry poems that nobody reads. The revolution will come. Mao, please just organize the books. When Japan invades China, Russia, now an ally of Britain and France, actually sends real military help, not communist ideology, actual tanks and planes. China's nationalist government under Chiang Kai-shek pushes Japan back by 1941. The US still embargoes Japan. Japan still attacks Pearl Harbor because the military leadership there was unhinged, and America still enters the war. But it's just the Pacific War. Europe's fine. By 1945, Japan surrenders. Korea never gets divided because there's no communist Russia to occupy the north. It's just one Korea. They elect a president. It's not perfect, but it's definitely better than what happened in our timeline. Kim Il-sung, who would have been North Korea's dictator, is instead a mid-level administrator who gets fired for being weird. Why do you keep asking people to worship you? I'm building a personality cult. This is a postal office. You're fired. So there's no Cold War. Russia and America aren't enemies. They're competitors, sure, but normal competitors, like Pepsi and Coke, not like two countries threatening nuclear annihilation. The space race still happens, but it's friendlier. 1957, Russia launches Sputnik. Nice satellite. Thanks, we copied your design. We know. Want to collaborate on a moon mission? Sure. They land on the moon together in 1965. The plaque says, humanity was here in both English and Russian. It's actually kinda nice. Without the massive military spending of the Cold War, both countries invest more in civilian technology. The internet gets invented in 1975 instead of the late 80s. Personal computers arrive earlier. But here's the funny part. Without the urgent competition, some things develop slower. GPS doesn't exist until 1995 because there's no military need. Nobody's trying to track Soviet missiles because there are no Soviet missiles. Wait, how do I navigate? You use a map, Gerald. A paper map. Yes. By 2025, Russia is like a bigger Poland. Democratic, capitalist, kind of corrupt, but in a normal European way, not a journalist fell out a window way. Moscow looks like Paris. They're in the European Union. China unified peacefully in the 1990s, when the nationalist government finally allowed real elections. It's a democracy with Chinese characteristics, which means there's still a lot of bureaucracy and censorship, but you can actually vote. Korea is an economic powerhouse and hasn't been split. Germany, still boring and efficient. They won the World Cup 4 times instead of 4 times. Wait, that's the same. Never mind. The weirdest change, McDonald's is Russian. In our timeline, McDonald's symbolized American capitalism entering Russia in 1990. In this timeline, a Russian entrepreneur named Vladimir McDonald, no relation to Scotland, invented the fast food burger in Moscow in 1948 and franchised it globally. The first American McDonald's opened in New York in 1952. This is a weird Russian thing, but the burgers are good. Today, there are 40,000 McDonald's restaurants worldwide, and they're all technically Russian franchises. The Cyrillic logo is iconic. Ronald McDonald speaks Russian in every commercial. Privyet, children, want capitalist burger? So, without communism, the 20th century turns out a lot less explodey. No Cold War, no Berlin Wall, no nukes pointed at everyone. Just capitalism, moderate corruption, and a suspicious number of Russian-owned McDonald's. Denikin's sitting in a cafe somewhere in Moscow, sipping tea. Congratulations, General. You saved Russia. I told you, tea solves everything. You mean patience. You nearly lost the war because of tea? It's both, and I nearly won it with tea. Balance, my friend. You can't stop the revolution forever. Watch me. History's weird. Sometimes empires fall because of overconfidence. Sometimes revolutions die because someone took a break at the right time. And sometimes the fate of humanity comes down to patience and a very Chinese turned British favorite beverage. But that's for another video. So next time someone says, it's just a 5-minute tea break, remember, that's how Russia defeated communism. Speaking of defeats, you know how Rome was defeated and fell to the Goths? I wonder what would happen if Rome didn't fall.